tell us about your book and how did this journey happen for you?
Sure. So I will show you. I just got my author copies very recently. So here's the cover there. It's exciting to be able to hold it for the first time.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful feeling. Uh, so I was an elementary school teacher for a long time. And honestly, one night I was flipping channels on TV and I came across a documentary that showed kids just slightly older than my students being herded into this truck and screamed and cursed at. And I was horrified. I didn't know what it was. So, of course, I stayed up very late until it was over and watched the whole thing. And that was how I found out about child trafficking. I guess I'd heard the word trafficking, but I hadn't ever honestly thought about it or really what it was. So then I started researching it and trying to learn more about it. And soon after that, my husband was transferred for his work. And that was an opportunity for me to get involved. Instead of going back to full-time teaching when we moved, I wanted to do part-time teaching and also get involved in the anti-trafficking movement. And the Houston area is known, it's a transportation hub. There's shipping and there's trains and there's just a lot of interstates. And it is a place that's really got a very high rate of trafficking of children. So I was able to find some volunteer work in some wonderful anti-trafficking organizations. I started out helping with fundraising and helping with events and volunteering in those types of capacities. But then I found one called Traffic 911, where they actually were expanding down area and needed someone to coordinate a program of going into juvenile detention centers with a trafficking awareness and prevention program where you would actually be talking with trafficking survivors and trying to help connect them with resources in their recovery and also giving reports for law enforcement. So lots of different angles about it. And in this work, I ended up learning so much about it and just talking with these kids and seeing what they went through. I decided that I wanted to reach more kids and just reach kids hopefully on a global level to let them know about this risk and let them know how they can be safe and be aware as they go online and on social media especially, but really just out in the world too, as they start navigating the world a little bit more independently. So I ended up thinking about how can I write a story that won't be too much for them, but that will alert them to this. And I think that in fiction, we absorb things differently than if we're just told facts. So you can tell children, well, there are these people called traffickers and these recruiters, and they're looking for kids that they might, find that they can kidnap or that they can lure into this. But if a child is actually reading a story and experiencing it along with a character, I think they'll understand it and empathize with the character and experience it in a different way, that they'll maybe process it and remember it very differently than if they were just told some facts about it.
Absolutely. And therefore, you also mentioned that this book is actually targeted at kids from the teenage bracket, let's say 11 to 14, right?
Right. The official age, from the publisher would be 5th grade and up, like 10 and up. So I'm really thinking for the way the schools are here, it's middle schools. That would be probably my biggest audience as far as targeted readership, because that's when the kids get so involved with their friends and so involved on social media and are becoming more independent. And I think that they can do that, but they can do it safely if they have an awareness of that there are people out there and very specifically looking for them at that age group.
Absolutely. I mean, you have really opened a big topic, and I'm sure that this is a big issue even in countries like India. I mean, of course, it's a huge, there exists a huge child trafficking racket even in India, and we keep hearing that in the news. And it is so good that you come up with a book in a fictional format, targeting at kids, making them aware of the dangers or what they should actually look out for. Honestly, I was reading somewhere, and we all know that social media and online spaces, they are quite addictive in nature, just like, let's say, an alcohol or smoking. But for alcohol, smoking, we all have the age barriers, right? I mean, they come with age barriers. At least if you go and try to purchase them, you will,
Mhm.
as a kid, you will not be allowed. But when it comes to social media, there is no age barrier for it. There is very little parental control that is available. For parents also, they are
Mhm.
learning this as and when with their kids, because for them also it's so new. So this whole space is so dangerous. How do you, when you talk to your students or in general, how do you perceive this whole environment for kids, and how safe it is for them, and what would be the recommended age, let's say, to start social media, right? I mean, it's scary.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. Yeah, it is scary and it's new. As a parent, I remember my daughter now is in her 20s, but she when she was in middle school and everyone was going on, I guess the kids used to go on Facebook, which I don't think they do. I think they go on Instagram more, but it changes. But I remember I was like, wait, what is this Facebook? I didn't even have it yet either. And I was kind of learning about it along with her when she wanted to do it. And I said, well, what is this? So I think the age that they allow the kids on is 13, but it's I don't know, it's hard to say because unfortunately I think once they get on there, it's so addictive and there's no going off because once you're there, it's 24/7. You can't say, like when I was a kid, I remember going to school and coming home. School ended at 3 or 3:30, depending on which age. And you were then kind of done for the day and you went about your business and you did your homework, lived your life, and you might have gotten together with a friend, but
Yes,
it wasn't all that. There was not this pressure of who's
constantly.
getting together and who's hanging out where and am I missing something and did I not get invited. It just seems like there's this pressure for kids, right, all the time to see what everyone else is doing. And I kind of like that
Absolutely.
they we used to be anonymous as kids. We would go home and if you called someone, great, and if you didn't, that was fine too. And you didn't have this whole, oh, there's 3 people have gotten together at the mall and they're posting pictures. Oh, I need to go to the mall
Mm.
now and join them. And I don't know, there's no break. So what you're saying about how addictive it is, I completely agree that that dopamine rush that people get when they get a like, that's something I do address in the book a little bit too.
Mm.
Um, how you get those likes and you can't turn away from them. And so, yeah, I think I wish it were older for sure. I think it's hard though, because then the kids feel left out. If, oh, my friends are all in there, and it's a tough situation. I think it's really important that kids understand some ground rules. I would say the biggest, if I could say one thing that kids really need to know, is not everybody is who they say they are on social
Yes.
media. And that could be from a story that happened, um, a true story that happened where this 12-year-old was messaging with someone for weeks who had a picture of themselves or several pictures that I'm sure they had gotten from somewhere of this 12-year-old girl who looked
Mm.
very much like just any friend of this other girl's at school. And they got to know each other, she thought she was getting to know this other friend and exchanging all these confidences. And then the friend said she wanted to meet at the park to play soccer. And the girl said, oh yeah, this is my friend, Mom and Dad, can you drop me off at the park? And they thought they were just dropping her off to meet another 12-year-old. And the person that she had been corresponding with was this much older man who then abducted her. And
Okay.
it's just horrifying. But because she saw the pictures and thought that was who it was. So I think that kids really need to understand anybody can say anything online.
Yep.
And that is a theme of my book, that anybody can say anything online. And you have to remember that these recruiters, these traffickers will become whoever you want them to be. And they can learn very quickly. They know how to talk to kids. They can learn
Mm.
very quickly. Does this young person want a friend? Do they want potentially a parental figure, depending on what's going on in their family? Are
Mm,
they looking for a relationship where they think it's a romantic relationship? Are they looking for a
mm,
love interest? What is it they're looking for? And then the trafficker, the recruiter can just try to become that.
mm,
And it's terrifying. They're actually called in the anti-trafficking world, the traffickers are called street psychologists because they can meet, like, for example, a runaway on the street and start talking to that kid, and in about 30 seconds figure out which persona to put on. Am I going to be like a parental figure who's going to take you in and give you a hot meal and a place to sleep? Or am I going to flirt with you and act like I think you're beautiful and I just, want to take you out on a date? Or what is it that you're looking for? And I will become that. And I think the kids need to understand that people are just going to be say or do or be whatever it takes to lure you in.
absolutely. Tell us about the writing process, like the characters of your book, or how did you go on developing them? Where did you get your, of course, you did a lot of research by being involved in this topic and feeling so passionate about it. But how was your process of doing it into a fiction, into a work of fiction, so to say?
Oh, sure. Well, I have been involved in the SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, for a long
Mm,
time. So I've certainly been studying the craft of writing for a long time, and all the little outlines we have and all the little things about, you start with your character and you think of an obstacle and think of more things that are going to be thrown in their path to make it harder for them, and then think about their character arc, how
mm,
they're going to grow and change and be different at the end than at the beginning of the story. So I had all those things in mind when
mm,
I was coming up with it. And I thought that 13 would be a good age for the main character because that's eighth grade. You're not quite in high school yet. You're not
mm,
quite that independent, but yet you're really trying to be.
mm.
Um, you're really trying to break into that world of being a little bit older,
Right.
and that felt like the right age. And I wanted my main character to be going through something a little difficult so that she'd be more vulnerable.
Vulnerable. Yes.
Right. And so what was happening, I think the need for belonging is so important.
Mm,
And these, especially in middle school, it's all about your friends and fitting in and
yeah.
feeling like you have a place. So I thought that could be sort of her deep need that's driving her behavior. And I thought of a scenario where a lot of the girls have their little groups of like four people that kind of do everything together. And two of them in her little group are twins. And so they move away.
Mm,
And so that's rough because suddenly your group is down to two. And
mm,
then her best friend, who's still there, had been in camp all summer and met a boy at camp and has this interest with this boy that actually goes to their school. And so
it's
Julia
like really
is,
lonely suddenly.
oh no. And her sister's very involved, and her sister's a little bit older and has just started driving and has a part-time job and is involved in all these activities. And her parents are both very busy with their work. And so she's feeling very left out and very
Mm,
lonely. And so it's kind of a rough time for the school year to start when everything's changed for her and she
mm,
doesn't know who she's going to sit with in the cafeteria and what she's going to do. So she's feeling vulnerable. And her older sister is somebody that she gets along pretty well with. I mean, there's the sisterly tension, of course, that all siblings, I think, have. But her sister cares about her and sees that she's kind of down. So she says, hey, want me to give you a makeover? Let's do something fun. Let's have a sister night. And she gets this makeover just in good fun. But she's noticing that her friends have these pictures where they're wearing makeup. The friends that moved have put on all this makeup on these pictures and they look very sophisticated to her. So she really likes the idea of posting that.
mm,
And she gets the picture up of herself and she's very glamorous in this picture, and that's when she gets the attention of this
mm.
guy named Tyler, who sends her a DM and is
Okay.
just like, hey, I don't know you but I wish I did, as his opening line.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it starts. She does know I shouldn't talk to a stranger online. She is aware, and so she doesn't really talk to him at first, and
Mm,
things get worse for her. at
Hmm.
school, she's getting lonelier and just feeling like she comes home one night and there's nobody in the house. Everybody's got, even her parents have more of a life than her, she thinks. So what's it going to hurt to just have a conversation with this?
Hmm.
Why not just, we can chat for a few minutes.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how it starts.
Very interesting. I mean, it really helps because, of course, you have the motive in your mind that you want to talk about this subject, but like without really getting onto the subject immediately, you're building a world for the character, you're building all the situations so that things get more and more easier or more and more engaging for a reader, right?
Mhm.
So what kind of books do you read, and what kind of writing inspires you? Um, and I would love to know how you plan to like move forward in your writing journey, what kind of books you plan to write. Uh,
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can actually show you right here. Let's see. I have some of my favorite books on my shelf. Like this book here, The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. I love this book. It's a middle grade. You'll notice if you look at my shelves, they're all pretty much all middle grade novels and YA.
Young adult
So
fiction, basically.
yes, young adult and middle grade. I very rarely read adult books because I think I just love this world of kids books so much
Hmm.
that I just love reading how other people are doing it and their characters. One of the books here, I'll show you. This was someone, I'm in a debut group of authors. This Sincerely Cicely just
Hmm.
came out January 1st, and it's phenomenal. It's a wonderful story. It's, I would say, contemporary um fiction back there is my favorite. I do like fantasy sometimes
Mm.
I get caught up in a fantasy, but I would say primarily
Contemporary.
I read the kind of thing I like to write. I
Hmm.
think it's interesting when you're reading as a writer because you're kind of looking and learning. Like I think
Yes.
almost any book can be a mentor text as
Yes.
far as okay, how are they handling the beginning? How are they hooking the reader? Okay, how is this voice made? Like Sincerely Cicely, the one I showed you, the voice is so authentic. I
Hmm.
really felt like it was this sixth grader the whole time. I
Yes.
was in her head and it was amazing. So I think when you're for me at least, it's I love reading and I just get so caught up in the stories, but there's this little part of me the whole time checking out this
Always
little box. All
analyzing
right,
it.
pacing, how are they doing with their pacing? Oh, I like this, it's really moving, it's
Mm.
just it's not too fast, it's not too slow. And so it really, it's just fun and different. I think when you do read as a writer, you kind of pull yourself out of the story a bit, but I think it's worth it because
Yeah.
it can help inform your own writing.
And how did you really find this voice for yourself? And do you think that you're still finding your voice? And how do, because I always hear this whole romantic idea of finding your voice as an author, and
Mhm.
it's almost like knowing yourself completely, and it sometimes sounds so hard to achieve,
Mhm.
So how has that process been for you? Because you talked about voice.
Yeah, voice is so interesting because it's one of those things like if you're sitting at a writing conference and that's a topic that comes up, and people will say to editors, well, what do you consider a good voice? What makes a good voice? And they always kind of say, well, it's almost impossible to describe, but we know it when we see it. And that's the
Yes,
answer you always
yes.
get. You're like, no, give me a formula, tell me what to do. I think it's getting to know your character so well that when you're writing, you're just in their head. It's
Mm,
almost like you're writing as as them, so you're not thinking about it as I'm a writer writing this story. You're
mm,
really them experiencing it, if that makes sense, and you're putting down what's happening to you. You just have to get, I think, that close to your character as far as understanding what brought them to that moment and maybe backstory things that you may or may not even have in the story, but just what are they afraid of? I think what is their biggest fear? What is their biggest dream? What is their biggest hope? And if you know those things about your character, I think you can write about them authentically.
mm. So it's
I
more
also, oh,
important to know the character's voice than worrying too much about your voice as an author. Is that how you would put it?
yes. In fact, I saw a wonderful webinar for authors on it was called Getting to the Heart of Your Character.
Hmm.
And it was so good. And it was talking about how you have your authorial voice, which is how you do first person, do you do third person, how do you approach the storytelling, but then you have your character's voice, and your character's voice always needs to come first.
Hmm.
So you always need to make everything that's on that page true to your character, as far as their point of view and what they would notice in the world and the way they would see the world. And you need to very specifically um, remember that if this is something Sydney Dunlap, might notice or observe or be aware of, but Julia, my character, wouldn't know about this or wouldn't see it, I better not put it in there.
Right.
So you kind of have to go through what I did after it was all written. And I felt like, I guess the story's never really done, right? You can always go back and feel like, oh, let me look at it one more time and fix this here and move this around. But I remember going through and I tried to just very specifically, all right, is there anywhere that this is just me, that something that's important to me that wouldn't be important to Julia, or something that a 13-year-old just wouldn't care about or
Mm.
just wouldn't be on her radar. Let me just take that out. And also, if there's anything that I've just said that sounds like me versus that sounds like her, I really need to get that out.
Mm.
Does does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Yes, I
Okay,
think
because
every author has like a different approach to handling their voice. And I often feel that it is better to not really overthink so much about
yeah.
your voice and
Mhm.
use that energy to actually explore the characters, because often creativity at its
Mhm.
core becomes something that you use to discover yourself. And as a writer, what you are also have an added
Mhm.
responsibility, so to say, is to discover your characters and knowing
Mhm.
them as deeply as possible.
Mhm.
So, yes, thank you for
Mhm.
all your views about writing. It's really refreshing to always speak to different authors and understand their point of views. I'm